Today's video I'm going to be discussing exactly what my half marathon fueling strategy is for my sub 1 hour 20 half marathon attempt, which is just under 5 days away now, so I'm super excited for that. I can't wait to see what I can do. This is my last video before my half marathon video, but in today's video specifically I'm going to be discussing how I'm carb loading in the build up to that, 48 hours before, what type of foods I'm going to be consuming. Can you just have a pizza at any cheat meal before you race? I'm going to be discussing the pros and cons to doing that. I'm going to be discussing what I'm going to be eating on race day, so my breakfast. I'm also going to be discussing my fueling strategy on the actual race itself, so what supplementations I'm going to be having, what drinks I'm going to be consuming, if any. I've titled this video My Fueling Strategy for my half marathon attempt, and the reason why I've done that instead of just how to strategize for your half marathon in terms of foods, etc. Everyone's going to be completely different. Ultimately, you're going to need a little bit of time to trial out these things. I do recommend trying the stuff that I'm doing because it does work for me. Carb loading is basically filling your body up with carbohydrates before you run, meaning that you're filling your glycogen stores up so you're going to have energy for the run. But why are we doing it? So there's two main energy sources that we use in our body. So we have fats and carbohydrates. With aerobic running, which is like running at a really easy pace, a pace that you can hold a conversation with someone at, it's not going to be too explosive the movement. Now on the other hand of that, we have anaerobic exercises, which is going to be really explosive movement, whether sprints or powerlifting. They're always the examples that I use. So with this in mind, we need to work out what fueling we're going to be using on race day. So you're never just burning fats or just burning carbohydrates. There's always going to be a gauge between it, but based off the intensity of your workout, you will be burning predominantly one or the other. So with this in mind, with my half marathon, I'm going to be running at an anaerobic pace, so I need to fuel my body up with carbohydrates, because with anaerobic exercises, with more explosive movements, we're going to be burning predominantly carbohydrates. With carb loading, there's a few different ways to go into it. So there's a little bit of play in terms of how much carbs to eat. Around 48 hours is the most typical time to implement carb loading. Some people do it over a 6-day window where they'll have less carbs for like 3 days and then push them up for the last 3 days. But I'm just going off what works for me. If it isn't broke, don't fix it. And last time I ran my marathon in 2 hours 55 minutes 58 seconds, I did that with a 48-hour carb load. So with carb loading, an easy gauge to go by is anything from 2.3 grams of carbohydrates per pound of body weight each day. So that's one daily consumption. So you can go from 2.3 grams up to around 5 grams. So for me personally, I have quite a fast metabolism, and I did around 3 to 4 grams of carbohydrates per pound of body weight. I weigh about 150 grams. 150 I'm not that light. I weigh about 150 pounds, so I consumed anything from 330 grams of carbs per day over the 2 days before I ran. So if I'm running on Sunday, that'll be Friday and Saturday. Don't know if anyone needed to know that, but I thought I'd explain the 48 hours. So it's not 48 hours before you actually run, it's kind of like 2 days before you race, if you like. So that's an easy rule to follow for how I carb load, but why exactly do I do it? So what carbohydrates do, it's in the name, so they hydrate you. So basically what carbohydrates do, they hold on to water. So if you consume more carbohydrates, that means that your glycogen stores are going to rise, meaning that you're going to be able to hold on to more energy in form of carbohydrates, but ultimately hold on to more bodily fluids, so water, so we're going to be able to be hydrated during the race, which is really, really important. As you go through the race, and if you're not hydrating yourself adequately, then your performance will start to get radically worse if you're losing hydration. So I don't want that to happen to me. I want to make sure that my body is hydrated, so I'm going to be able to perform to the best of my abilities on race day. So I don't know if anyone has watched any MMA, but basically any MMA or boxing fights, the last few pounds of weight, fighters will tend to take off their bodies unless it's kind of heavyweight, where it's a little bit more of an open limit, up to 265 pounds. But typically on weight classes that people cut weight for, so kind of light heavyweight or lower, 205 pounds or lower, fighters will mostly be cutting water weight to get to those last few pounds. So how they do that, they basically take out carbohydrates from the diet and they stop drinking water, so they're dehydrating themselves. So all this fluids that our body's holding on to, so your muscles are filled up with water, and then your body will let go of this water weight, hence why fighters can lose so much pounds over the course of 24 hours, because basically all they're doing is dehydrating themselves. So sodium or salt is basically what fighters will take out of the diet with carbohydrates so that they're not holding on to water weight, so that they can cut those last few pounds before they weigh in at championship weight. So a good example of this, Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 2, the rematch that they had recently that Dustin Poirier won. If you look at Conor McGregor's physique in the official weigh-in, so basically there's 2 weigh-in sessions that UFC will do. There's an official weigh-ins, which is their actual weight, so he weighed in at championship weight, 155 pounds, and then the next day his body would have probably gained 10 to 15 pounds before he actually fought on fight night. So you look at the difference in your body. So if you have a look at his kind of shoulders and his physique in general, he looks depleted and kind of shrunk down. But then if you look at him the following day, when he's got the ceremonial weigh-in, so this is just kind of like a gimmick really, when crowds were allowed in, go to these ceremonial weigh-ins, and it's just more for the atmosphere, but the official weights were done 24 hours ago. But look at his physique, how his shoulders have bulked up, and just generally how his physique looks fuller, his muscles look fuller, and this is because he was so dehydrated to make the weight, and then he's basically just filled up his body again with fluids, sodium and carbohydrates. So his body is basically gained a lot of weight in terms of carbohydrates and water. This is essentially what carb loading is for running. So we're not cutting the weight, obviously we don't want to get down to weight like you would do in fighting, but this is how it can work and how your physique can radically change if you're consuming a lot of carbohydrates and sodium. If anyone's into bodybuilding, quite often bodybuilders will eat things like pickles or put a bit of salt in their pre-workout meal because you can get a bigger pump. So basically salt or sodium holds on to water, so ultimately it's going to hydrate us on race day, which is exactly what we want. So now carb loading is explained, now let's get into the fun part of what types of foods I'm going to be consuming before a run, the 48 hours in my carb loading window, what foods am I going to be consuming. So it's quite common for runners to have takeaway foods or kind of have a little bit of a cheat meal, if you like, if you want to call it that. People have pizzas, burgers, things like that. A reason why I don't have that, so I think a good explanation, I was walking past a school the other day. I live by a school. I should have probably said that the other way around. I'd have triggered 2 responses of people. They're either going to be like, oh, I didn't realise they had kids, or what is my man doing hanging around schools? Like, just to clarify, I don't have kids. You know, not a family yet anyway. I had the smell when I was walking past the school. There's a bakery, or they were baking some goods, and it just reminded me, it was quite nostalgic, it reminded me of the tuck shop when little Jimmy was in primary school. And that's the thing with foods or kind of taste or smell, it triggers emotional attachments to those senses. So you get these nostalgic feelings with either like foods you used to have as a kid, if you had kind of a fairly rememberable time as a kid or a good experience as a kid. In lockdown, I've been having takeaways once a week. So on a Sunday I'll chill out. Sunday's my day off. I'll have takeaways and I'll watch a series or just chill out, watch a podcast, something. And it's really, really enjoyable for me. But every time I do that, it kind of is a way where I relax. So I don't want to have takeaway foods where it triggers this response, this emotional response where I can chill out. So it's quite good to chill out before a race, but I know it's going to require me to kind of pick myself back up again the next day. So it's that reason, and like I said, you don't quite know what you're eating if it's takeaway. It might upset your stomach, and that's the last thing you want on race day. You don't want to feel uncomfortable, especially if you have spicy food or something. That's the main reason why I tend to stick with foods that I know my body can consume very easily. So if anyone watched my full day of eating, those are the type of foods that I eat. So typically I'll have kind of salmon in terms of protein and fats, and then carbohydrates can be anything from ugali, rice, sweet potatoes, pasta. These types of carbohydrates I know work really well for me. So different proteins, kind of like eggs, chicken, any kind of fatty or oily fish is really, really good because that's increasing the amount of fats we have in our body as well. So even though we're burning predominantly carbohydrates, like I explained earlier, you're still going to be burning a little bit of fat. So you can cook with oil or butter or coconut oil, anything like that. So fats and stuff is really, really good. But like I said, I like to stick with foods that I know I can consume, and I'll leave all the takeaway foods, all the cheap meals for after the race as a bit of a reward for me personally. That's what I like to do. If you want to have a pizza and knock yourself out, do so at your peril, mate. Race day fueling with breakfast. When do I eat breakfast? So a good few things that I like to do. I tend to eat soon as I get up in the morning. Say if I'm running at 9 o'clock, I'll eat kind of around 6 a.m, 7 a.m, something like that. I like to eat around 2 hours at least before I go out and run. The main reason why I do this is just so that I can go to the toilet before I go out and run. I'll have a black coffee with my meal. So you have the stimulants, of course, so that's going to make you perform a little bit better as well. But the main reason is just so I can go to the toilet. So coffee or caffeine in general helps contractions in our colon. So the final stage of the digestive tract is activated if you have caffeine or coffee. So this is going to make us go to the toilet, which ultimately is really, really important before we go out and run. The typical one I eat before I go out and run, that seems to work really well with me. My body can digest it really well. I'll have one bagel with some almond butter, banana, and then some honey drizzled over it as well. So you have carbohydrates in the bread, in the bagel, then you have fats and a little bit of protein in the peanut butter. Protein isn't too important pre-race, in the almond butter, sorry. And then you have carbohydrates again in terms of banana, and you have quick releasing carbohydrates in terms of sugar from the honey. So this is ultimately going to give me everything I need on race day. Something else to consider as well, you don't really want to be eating foods that are high in fibre before you go out and race. The main reason is fibre basically helps us digest food, so that's not really what we want to eat before we go out on a run. So bananas are great before you want to go out and run because there's not an awful lot of fibre in bananas, but other fruits that you probably want to avoid, in my personal opinion, like berries, cherries, blueberries, raspberries, these type of foods are great for post-run, but you don't want to be consuming them before you go out and run because there's a bigger % chance that you're going to be looking for a bush on race day. We don't want to be doing that, so we want to stack the deck in our favour so there's less chance of us wanting to go to the toilet and feeling more uncomfortable on race day. So how much fluids and what fluids should you be drinking before you go out and run? So I have one of these here. This is just a typical protein shake, about 600 ml it is apparently. Just found that out, but I like to have 3 of these, so there's more than a pint in these, but I like to have 3 of these over the course of before a run. So I typically get up at 6 a.m. My run time on my half marathon is 9 a.m, so within 3 hours I consume 3 of those protein shakers full of water. So you don't want to have too much water or fluids that you can hear the fluids sloshing about in your stomach. So this might take a little bit of trial and error over your training program. Do it before your long runs. Practice with breakfast before your long runs so you know what works for you, what is comfortable for you. This is your trial and error process. And on race day, you basically just want to keep that routine going and treat it like a normal long run. That way it's going to put our mind at ease, and also we have confidence knowing exactly the amount of quantities that suits us personally. But a thing to bear in mind, a big mistake a lot of rookies or first timers will do, they'll drink a load of water before they run but they don't have any salt. It's counterintuitive and it becomes a point of diminishing returns even when it's sloshing in your stomach. Or what you're actually doing is basically wiping out all the salt in your body, so you're washing out all the sodium in your body. You can get sodium pills. I personally don't like to have too many pills before I go out and run. I like to just crack some pink Himalayan sea salt into my water before I go out and run. If I'm having oats, I'll put it on there. Then I might even just put a little bit on my bagel, so there's also salt in, or sodium in almond butter or peanut butter, anything like that. So those sodium contents are really important before you go out and run, because otherwise, like I was saying earlier, our body will basically let go of water easier, and when your body lets go of water, you'll either get cramps when you're dehydrated or fatigued. You're going to get fatigued in running, especially when you're pushing yourself, and then when you're dehydrated as well, you can get some nasty cramps. So that's one thing to bear in mind. You don't just want to consume water because you'll wipe out all the vitamins and minerals that your body's holding on to, but as well you'll wipe out all the sodium, which is just a big no-no before you go out and run a race. So that's my race day fueling, but specifically on the race, what I'm going to be consuming. Am I going to be drinking water or whatever? What is it? So I basically like to have isotonic energy gels. I like to use these Science in Sport energy gels. So these basically have a lot of carbohydrates in, but also they have electrolytes in, so ultimately our body's going to stay hydrated a little bit better, so they help hydrate you and they give you carbohydrates. So when do you want to be consuming these energy gels? So I'll typically have one just before I go out and run, just so I know straight away I have energy. And typically you want to be having them from anything from every 20 to 30 to even 40 minutes. I like to have them around 20 to 30 minutes, but you don't want to wait too late, because if you wait too late, your body's basically diminishing its carbohydrates or its glycogen stores as you push yourself throughout the run, because you're running at more of an anaerobic pace. You don't want to have or leave the gels too late, because if you do that, the damage will already be done essentially. So you like to kind of keep topping up. You imagine there's a scale, and as you go through the race, your carbohydrates coming down. You have a little gel, it bumps it back up, and then it's coming down, and you have a little gel again, bumps it back up. If anyone's never tried one of your gels, the way I often explain it, if anyone's ever watched Fast and Furious, the old Paul Walker ones of course, it's an intense race and then they're looking at each other like this, and all of a sudden they apply NOS. You can almost feel these instantly. I love the feeling of it. You feel so energized as soon as you have them. Your body just digests it so quickly. It's pretty bizarre, to be honest. You have this and then literally 30 to 45 seconds later, something like that, you just feel the NOS kick in, man. It's absolutely great. It's a great feeling. It does feel a little bit weird at first, so if you haven't tried these, I'll experiment trying them before you go out and run, like on your long runs, for example. Not everyone likes to have gels, but they work well for me. You can have electrolyte supplements, like saying within Lucozade Sports, any kind of sports drinks like that. You can also have electrolytes in terms of little pills, so you can have that with sodium as well, so little tablets that you can consume. So that's before and during the race. So what type of foods do you want to eat after? I'll get over the boring bit first. So I typically have a post-run smoothie, which has got protein powder, creatine, spinach, kale, avocado, banana, beetroot, carrot, celery, oat milk. I tend to use oat milk when I have my smoothies. Cherries, I like to have cherries, but you can have any kind of berries, apples, anything like that. So it's quite a hefty shake, but a really good thing I like to do as well post run is have some turmeric, whether you have it in a powder or you can actually blend it in your blender as well. So turmeric's really good for anti-inflammatory purposes, so this is really good to have after a race when our muscles and joints are a little bit more inflamed, so that can help with that. So the next day is going to feel a little bit easier on yourself. So the protein is repairing the muscles we've used. The creatine is basically filling the body's back up with glycogen, so carbohydrates. Creatine doesn't work well for everyone, but again, it works well for me. But also a really good thing to have is either like flax or chia seeds. So they basically have a lot of fiber in, but also they have good healthy fats. So this is something that's really good to consume after it. That's how the sensible man or woman would consume foods after a run. But to be honest with you, I like to be really disciplined before I go out and run, but after my run it's just the floodgates open, man. I'm going to be consuming Krispy Kremes, I'm going to be consuming some alcohol. I haven't had a drink for like 3 months. I've actually bought some it's in here, got it in the fridge already about 5 days early, some mango dead man's fingers spiced rum. Oh, and it's my birthday month in April as well. Oh my god, I didn't realise it's an Aries. I don't believe in star signs, but I do believe in this stuff right here. I can't wait to have this post run. Like I said, I like to be disciplined before my runs, but after my run, the floodgates open, man. That's when I like to enjoy myself. If you found value in this video, please do consider dropping it a like, subscribe if you're new, if you fancy seeing more content. And as well, YouTube sometimes doesn't give you videos in the algorithms even when you subscribe to someone, so if you want to get that notification that I've put a new video out, so my next video will be my half marathon, sub 1 hour 20 half marathon attempt. I'm super excited to see what I can do, so put the notification bell on as well, just to make sure you're notified when I run that race if you want to watch that. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week in my half marathon video. I can't wait, I'm super excited. Let's go! Let's go!
At the tippy top of my game, looking down at the rafters. I had to sun these boys, can't leave them bastards. A lot of dudes, just some undercover actors. I don't fall for